So we're going to talk about how the laws of motion in physics relate to investing today. So at school I was rubbish at physics and I didn't quite understand how the laws of motion or how Isaac Newton could relate to my day-to-day activities. I've been investing for 20 years, I traded gas for 7 years, and I kind of finally understood the laws of motion, and it can apply to my day-to-day life. So we're going to explain how the laws of motion can apply to investing. So we're going to go through inertia, the first law of motion, then we're going to go through momentum, the second law of motion, and then we're going to go through the third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So inertia is getting going. It's that initial energy that it takes. So it's much harder to get anything moving until it starts getting moving. So think of it like investing. So it's really hard to actually start to invest. So I really encourage people to pay themselves first and actually take an active interest in investing, because today investing is a life skill that everyone needs to know. So with inertia, it takes more energy to get going than it does once it gets going, then it starts to increase and get that momentum. So inertia, it's just think about like pushing a rock. So pushing that rock initially will be quite difficult, but once that rock gets moving, the same force applied to it will mean that rock it's easier to push with the same force. So that's the same with inertia. So once you start investing, once you start building up that wealth and start building up that money going into your investment vehicle, it gets easier and easier and easier. And that brings us on to the second law of motion, which is momentum. So once things start moving, so imagine that rock start moving, it's easier to keep going until another force, it will keep going until another force hits it and stops. So with investing, think of it like a bicycle. So once you start cycling, so if you get on a bike and you start cycling, those first few pedals, push the pedal, are quite difficult. So that's the inertia of getting things going. But once you start moving and start getting going, it gets much easier. Less force needs to be applied to move at the same speed. So with momentum, it also means that smaller things move easier than bigger things. So imagine on the bicycle that we're talking about, imagine you've got two bikes, one with a small child in it and the other one with a 20-stone kind of big guy on it. So if you're going to push those two bikes, you push the child who's much lighter, it's going to go much further and it's much easier than the same force applied to that same bicycle but with someone much heavier on it. So this is related to investing by so small companies can grow much quicker than kind of big lumbering companies. So a measure that people use, or the press use, is the Footsie 100. So Footsie 100 companies is the 100 biggest companies in the UK. And these are kind of well-known brands, established companies. But these companies are huge, they're kind of multinational companies. And if you're going to put the same amount of force, the same amount of money, investing in a bunch of small companies and a bunch of bigger companies, the bunch of smaller companies are more likely to grow much quicker, or the same force applied to it. They're going to move much quicker than the lumbering companies that are the FTSE 100. So you need to kind of be aware of what are you actually investing in, and this is momentum. So think of it like the bicycle. So the more momentum you get, the quicker your portfolio will grow. And then this comes to the third law of motion, which is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So think of this like the more force you put, or the more money you put into investing, the more you're going to get out of it at the end. So by investing more, by paying yourself first every month, or putting, say, 10% or 50%, if you put 10% compared to 15% of your earnings every month into an investment vehicle, that action you get out of it is going to be much greater than that you would get otherwise. So this is force equals mass times acceleration. So the force you put into, the money you put in, will equal the mass. So the smaller kind of companies are going to grow much quicker, and you will get that acceleration of kind of growth. So just to summarise the laws of motion with investing. So number one is inertia, so getting going. So start paying yourself first every month, and this builds up the inertia. Number two is momentum. So once like a bicycle, once you get going, it's much easier to keep going. And then third, every action is an equal and opposite reaction. So coming back to that bicycle now example, so every time you move, you can move that direction of that bicycle to the direction you want, depending on what lifestyle you want. So this is just summarising the laws of motion and how this can affect your investing.